The money changed everything before the first punch was thrown. October 1960, Louisville, Kentucky. The gym smelled the same. Sweat, leather, old wood, the faint metallic trace of blood that never quite left the canvas. But the air felt different. Heavier, thicker, with consequence. Cassius Clay stood in the locker room, 18 years old, hands wrapped tight in white tape and gauze. And for the first time in his life, every movement belonged to someone else's investment. The contract had been signed 3 weeks ago, black ink on white paper, legal, binding. The sponsors had placed their bets. This wasn't practice anymore. This wasn't the Olympics. This was business. He'd fought before. 100 amateur bouts, give or take. Won a gold medal in Rome with the whole world watching, cameras flashing, the weight of that medal around his neck feeling like validation, like proof. But those fights had been his. Win or lose, the consequences stayed inside the ring, stayed inside his body, his pride, his record. Tonight was different. Tonight, losing meant more than a bruised ego or a mark in the loss column. It meant failed expectations, wasted money, doubt in the eyes of men who'd gambled real capital on potential they couldn't measure, only assume. The locker room door opened and closed. Voices drifted in from the hallway, low, careful, the kind of talk that happened when money was on the line. Familiar faces mixed with new ones, people who'd known him since he was a boy riding his bike through the West End, and people who only knew what they'd read in the Courier Journal or heard whispered at the gymnasium. The line between the two was thin now, barely visible, eroding with every passing minute. He could feel it shifting beneath him like sand. His opponent was already in the building, Tunney Hunsaker, a police chief from West Virginia who fought on the side. Not a name that sold tickets or made headlines, not a fighter who promised spectacle or danger, just a man with experience, durability, scar tissue, and nothing left to prove. 31 years old, 17 professional fights, 8 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw. The kind of opponent designed to test whether talent could survive pressure, whether Olympic speed meant anything when the stakes were real and the ref was unprotecting you from yourself. Cassius adjusted his gloves. The leather felt tighter than usual, constricting around his knuckles, or maybe his hands felt different, swollen with anticipation. He couldn't tell anymore. His fingers flexed inside the padding, open, closed, open again. A rhythm he didn't control. The crowd outside wasn't massive, but it was dense. Maybe 2,000 people packed into Freedom Hall's smaller exhibition space. Bodies pressed into seats that amplified every sound. He could hear them through the concrete walls, murmurs rising and falling, bursts of laughter, the scrape of metal chairs, the pop of concession stand popcorn. Among them sat the men who'd funded this moment, the Louisville sponsoring group, 11 white businessmen who'd pooled their resources, $10,000 total, to turn Olympic gold into professional profit. They weren't cruel, they weren't exploitative. They'd offered him a path forward when the endorsements hadn't come, but they were watching, and their silence had weight. He'd told them he'd be great, promised them championships, television, magazine covers. He'd said it with confidence when contracts bound him to deliver rather than just perform. And now the clock was ticking. The call came. Time to move. Cassius stood. His legs felt solid. He rolled his shoulders, loosened his neck, the ritual of preparation. He took one last breath. Long, controlled. Then he moved toward the door. He walked through the corridor. Fluorescent lights overhead. Concrete walls on both sides, each step deliberate, controlled, measured. The noise grew louder as he approached the arena, transformed from muffled suggestion to sharp reality. When he stepped through the curtain into the light, the crowd shifted, bodies leaning forward, conversations cutting off mid-sentence. Not a roar, not adulation, not the explosion of sound he'd heard in Rome when they announced his name and every American in the building had stood. This was different. This was attention, cold and evaluating, clinical. They wanted to see if the boy from the Olympics could carry his speed into the professional world, if the confidence was real or borrowed, if gold medals translated to paydays. The ring sat elevated in the center of the hall, canvas stretched tight, ropes sagging slightly in the humidity, the corners stained with decades of resin and sweat. Nothing glamorous, nothing clean, just functional, a workspace where men came to prove something or lose it trying. Across the ring, Hunsucker waited, already standing, already warmed up, older, thicker through the chest and shoulders. A body built for endurance, not beauty. His face showed the miles, scar tissue over both eyes, a nose that had been broken and set poorly, the slight sag of skin that came from too many punches, absorbed over too many years. But his eyes were calm, unbothered by the moment, by the crowd, by the young fighter entering with a 100-0 amateur record and Olympic credentials. He'd been here before, many times. This was Tuesday for him. Another night, another check, another opponent who'd probably be faster but maybe not smarter. For Cassius, it was everything. He climbed through the ropes. The canvas felt solid under his feet. Good traction, no give. The ref called them to center. An older man with grey hair and tired eyes who'd probably worked 100 of these small-time professional debuts. He gave the instructions quickly, mechanically. Protect yourself at all times. Break when I say break. No hitting below the belt, behind the head or after the bell. Touch gloves. They touched. Leather on leather, brief contact, then back to corners. The bell rang. The first minute was cautious. Both men circling, testing distance, reading intent, measuring reaction time. Cassius moved the way he always had, light on his feet, weight shifting constantly, head swaying in small, unpredictable arcs, hands low and loose at his waist, but the rhythm was tighter, less playful, less exploratory. He wasn't here to dazzle. He wasn't here to experiment or discover new angles. He was here to prove control, to show that the style could survive contact with someone who wanted to hurt him. Hunsucker pressed forward, not reckless, just steady. Professional. He cut off angles, forced Cassius toward the ropes, tested his composure with jabs that weren't designed to land clean, but to measure distance and disturb rhythm. And Cassius didn't panic, didn't revert to amateur habits. He slipped, pivoted, reset position. His punches came in flurries, quick, sharp, precise combinations that landed more often than not. But he didn't chase the knockout. Not yet. Maybe not at all tonight. That wasn't the assignment. The assignment was to win, cleanly, convincingly, without risk. The crowd began to notice. This wasn't the show they expected. No taunts, no theatrics, no dancing or showboating or predictions shouted between rounds. Just a young man fighting like he had something to lose. Like he understood that every punch, every decision, every moment of restraint or aggression would be catalogued and discussed tomorrow morning over coffee by men with checkbooks. Round after round, the pattern held. Hunsucker tried to break him down, worked the body, tested his stamina, forced him into exchanges in the corners where experience should have mattered more than speed. And Cassius refused to break. He controlled distance like it was the only thing that mattered in the world, like every inch of canvas was territory that had to be managed, defended, reclaimed. When Hunsucker lunged, Cassius wasn't there. When Cassius struck, it landed. Small victories, accumulating the math of professional fighting. By the middle rounds, sweat covered both men. The air in the arena was thick with humidity and cigarette smoke that hazed the overhead lights. Cassius's breathing was controlled. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the rhythm of someone who'd run countless miles preparing for exactly this kind of sustained effort. Hunsucker was breathing harder, heavier. Age and mileage showing in the slower resets, the slightly delayed reactions. The question wasn't whether Cassius would win anymore. Even the crowd could see that. The question was whether he'd learned what professional meant. And he had. Every choice in the ring reflected it. No unnecessary risks, no wasted energy, no attempts to force a finish that might leave him exposed. Just efficiency, wrapped in discipline, wrapped in the kind of patience that looked boring to people who didn't understand what they were watching. Round 5. Round 6. The bell at the end of each 3-minute interval sounded like punctuation in a sentence that was already complete. The final bell came, both men still standing. No dramatic finish, no knockout for the highlight reel or the newspaper photos. Just a clear, controlled performance that left no doubt about the outcome. They touched gloves at center ring. Hunsaker nodded once. "You passed the test." The judges confirmed it. Unanimous decision. Cassius Clay, 6 rounds to 0. His hand was raised. The crowd offered polite applause, recognition, a transaction completed. In the locker room afterward, he sat on the bench, gloves off, hands still buzzing. The adrenaline was draining. His face was unmarked. Hunsaker had barely touched him, but his body knew the work. The sponsors filtered in, smiles, handshakes, relief visible. Men who'd gambled and won. They'd gotten what they paid for. Someone handed him his paycheck. William Faversham, the attorney. The envelope was thin, white. Cassius took it, felt the weight. The first real money he'd earned with his fists, $2,000. He stared at it for a moment, not because it was large, it wasn't, but because it represented a shift he couldn't undo. The line between amateur and professional wasn't just a contract. It was a choice to let every punch carry someone else's expectations. He folded the check and slipped it into his pocket. Outside, the arena emptied, families filing out, fighters gathering their bags. Louisville returned to its quiet rhythm. But for Cassius, the night didn't close. It opened. He'd proven he could win when it mattered, when eyes were watching, when money was involved. But he'd also learned something harder to name. Winning wasn't enough anymore. Performance had to justify investment. Talent had to meet responsibility. Every fight would be measured not just by the outcome, but by how well he managed the weight of other people's expectations. The locker room cleared. He stood slowly, feeling the stiffness beginning. He gathered his things, the gym bag, the check in his pocket. He left the building alone, stepping into air that had cooled considerably. The streetlights cast long shadows. The moon was out, half full, the kind of night that felt suspended between what was and what came next. He walked slowly, hands loose at his sides, the buzz of the fight still humming in his bones. His knuckles ached, his shoulders carried the memory of 6 rounds. But his mind was quiet. He'd done what he needed to do. Somewhere behind him, the gym went dark. Somewhere ahead, the next fight waited. And all the fights that would follow, until he either made good on his promises or failed trying. But in that moment, between victory and consequence, walking alone through empty streets with a check in his pocket and the weight of professional expectations settling onto his shoulders, he understood the cost of becoming professional. It wasn't about losing innocence. It was about accepting that from this point forward, nothing he did in the ring would belong only to him. Every punch was an investment. Every fight was a return. Every decision would be evaluated by people who measured success in dollars. The night Cassius Clay was paid to fight, he learned that professionalism demands more than talent. It demands control.